to thank our sponsors. These are the gold ones, and these are the silver ones, and especially to Carolina Distance Learning and Proctor U for sponsoring this specific session. So now I would like to hand the microphone over to your session chair for this session, Penny Kukan, to help you get us started today. All yours, Penny.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Penny Kukan, and I'd like to welcome you to the OLC Live Heart of Engagement, introducing Madeline Shalgren and Dan Trago, both from Michigan State University. And I look forward to this session as I had joined one Madeline was in, last week about escape rooms. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the rest of the session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Penny. And I have the privilege to introduce a few other surprise guests today. So we are also joined by the one and only Angela Gunder, Keegan Long-Wheeler, and John Stewart. And we're going to actually, I'll ask a question and allow Angela to respond, at least to give a little bit of insight to the history of the Innovation Studio space before she has to pop off. But I'm incredibly excited to be joined by all of these faces, including my co-chair this year, Dan Trago. So the hope and goal of this particular session, of course, is to talk a little bit about what the Innovation Studio is, where it became or where it began, and where we all might see it go. I absolutely feel free to add questions in the chat if you are new to the studio space or even this idea. If you want to know what it took to make it, how to find volunteers, those are some of the conversations I hope to get into today. I do have some questions here just in case no one else has any. However, if you would like to know more, feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to be responsive to those as we go about this day. So I'll give a brief opportunity for the group of folks, John, Keegan, Angela, and Dan, to introduce themselves before we get into this first question. How about we go Dan, Keegan, John, and then Angela. And when you get to Angela, the one and only Angela Gunder, how about we start with, where did this concept even start? So Dan, I'll have you introduce yourself first here.
Well, thanks, Maddie. My name's Daniel Trago, and I'm at Michigan State University, and I'm a digital media specialist. And this is my second year working with the Innovation Studio. Do a lot of design thinking and storytelling, and we'll be talking about that in a bit.
And my name...
Yeah, go ahead, Keegan. I can't remember if I said you were John next.
It's all good. My name is Keegan Long-Wheeler. I'm an educational technologist out of the University of Oklahoma. And I came into the Innovation Lab, I think it was 2017 was the first time as a volunteer, and then took it over the next year, just took it. And then, yep. And then, yeah, that's about it for me. So we're good.
And I'm John Stewart. I'm also at the University of Oklahoma. I'm the assistant director for our Office of Digital Learning. And yeah, I guess I started off as a volunteer with Keegan in 2017. And we were working on, we had a game lab that year. And then as Keegan was taking over the entire innovation lab in 2018, I was the engagement chair for OLC Innovate that year and helped him with anything he needed there. So been working on it for a few years and interested in hearing Angela's explanation for how the whole thing started.
I'm Angela Gunder. I'm the VP of Learning for the OLC, and prior to that I was at the University of Arizona helping with the instructional design team, building out all the online courses for the university. And that's where I met all of these fine folks and many, many more, and was really compelled to do more within the organization of the OLC based on the formative conversations that I had both in the Innovation Studio, which actually started as the Innovation Lab, and then prior to that, the Technology Test Kitchen. So it's funny for me to kick this off with history. For somebody that was not good at history in school ever, I spent a lot of time talking about narrative and origin stories, which John will laugh since he's a historian that it's all history. But basically the entire notion of an exploratory installation You'll hear some people talk about them as maker spaces for the OLC. Started with those interstitial moments that happen in between sessions at conferences, or even better, after all the sessions have concluded and people are having a little bit of social time. And Felice Banner, Frank Tomsick, and Clark Shaw Nelson got together on the beach at the Walt Disney Swan and Dolphin. So if any of you have been to OLC Accelerate, you'll know exactly the location that I'm talking about. And reflected on the fact that in conferences and a lot of these face-to-face experiences, they were really pushing for constructivist and connectivist learning, ways to move from that sort of sit and get type of mode. Dave Goodrich, also from MSU, also talks about like the rock star professor that runs in and is just, you know, is a center of attention, and, you know, kind of moving us away from that model and saying we're all learners. We're all here to socially construct and build knowledge. And they said, well, what if we started creating spaces within conferences where we could do that, where we could model that type of teaching and learning, where we could model those types of collaborations and interactions. And I guess it was about 2015. I might have my dates wrong. Again, not great at history, but you can certainly look back that the TTK started, and they built a space that had a series of booths and stations. Folks could wander into the space. There were learning outcomes for it, but they were not prescriptive. And you could have conversations with fellow educators. You could bring your challenges and your problems into the space, and you would start to collaboratively build and construct knowledge together. That has turned into many iterations of different initiatives, both within and beyond the spaces, that really get at the purpose of us getting together at the same time and space, and arguably spending money to breathe the same air in a physical location, of just, we are better based on our connections. We are better when we're sharing practices, and we're better when we're removing these sort of old paradigms of, you know, you have these sort of different layers of hierarchy, but in actuality, we have a lot that we need to conquer collectively in order to best support our students. I promised everybody that I would never say now more than ever, because everybody's using that expression right now in the pandemic, but truly in these really complicated times, it's connections like these and spaces like these that can help us actually do good work and create more access points for our students. So it's been several years that we've had multiple iterations of the space, with each person that takes it over, and Keegan's language was really good about like taking it over. The person at the helm, or the people at the helm, they make it their own, they remix it, and we continue to adapt and grow.
Thank you, Angela, for kicking us off with a bit of that history. So based on what you were saying, I actually would be interested in moving to Keegan and John next, in that when you hopped into the Innovation Studio space, what was some of your immediate reactions? And if you can at the time, to maybe speak a little bit to the role of volunteers within the OLC organization to date, at least, and the ways in which that particular role has provided an opportunity to really speak into the conference environment.
Yeah, so I first attended in 2016, I think, when we were in New Orleans. And one of the first places I went, I probably went to a session first, but I don't remember. The first thing I remember from that year was going to the test kitchen and meeting Clark Shaw Nelson and Ben Scragg, who were our conference chairs last year. And then they introduced me to Angela and Jess Knott, who were the conference chairs the year before that. And it just seemed like where everybody went, as Angela said, in those interstitial moments between sessions, to both, you know, talk about what we'd seen so far and what we were excited about so far, but then also to, you know, to learn from each other and to just meet each other. And so as you said, the volunteers that were in the test kitchen, that was where everybody came together, and where you started sort of working on the conference and getting to know what the conference was all about. And then pretty much everybody who's volunteered in the TTK has either stuck around and worked as a chair in the following years, or you know, some other role within OLC. And so it's a great way to get to know the conference. And then I'm interested, you know, in a few minutes, I'm sure, getting to hear about how it's changed as we moved online. But for me, that was the place to hang out and to meet everyone. And it's interesting to see how it's changed over the past couple of years, and how Keegan sort of morphed it over those following 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Keegan, I'll pass to you, and particularly, can you speak a little bit to the brain power that went into things like whose design is it anyway?
Well, those kinds of things were came from were some of the parts that were retained from previous sessions just because they were so good previous years. I think the special quality about the Innovation Lab and Studio is that's the place at the conference, at least for me, that's hard to leave. I think like maybe it's because everybody just gathers there at different times, and there's sessions that come to you, and it just it's fun to like be in there, as John said, with all the folks that that gather in that space. And I think that one of the things that's really interesting is the blend of flavors that have carried on year to year, because it's it would so it would be hard to imagine what a 2017 Innovation Lab looked like from start to finish, right? Like that would be an enormous amount more work than being able to take the inspirations and things from folks over the years, and how that kind of allows for, I guess, more rapid prototyping, but also like more refinement and more like more exploration all at the same time, just because you have a strong foundation that you're building from. And I think those are aspects of it too. I mean, it's one of the fun things too. So my theme for 2018 was it was campy, so I'm camping today. But yeah, I don't know. It was good. It was fun to bring in a whole bunch of folks. The year that I did it, we had an undergrad come in with an instructor, and they worked on storytelling, and we had just all sorts of awesome things. But it was good. It's good. I don't know if that even answered the question, but that's my answer.
It did in part, yeah. And I think for the sake of the audience, both our live today and the asynchronous audience that follows, is that it's hard to be speaking about the origins of the Innovation Lab and now the Innovation Studio in this context, because I think so many of us are used to walking into that vendor exhibit hall and seeing the pipe and drape walls and recognizing what it was like to walk into that space and be welcomed by the many volunteers that really made it something unique. And I think back to, and Angela's providing a little bit more of some history and some storytelling there in the chat if you want to follow along. But I think it's really unique. These sorts of engagement programs are also how I entered into the organization, and remembered being taken aback by just how welcoming those spaces truly were, but also how amazingly innovative and generative it was to be surrounded by folks that just wanted to sit and think and ideate and come up with these fun solutions. And it was I often called it a conference within a conference, because you really could spend all your time there, but still be engaging in meaningful professional development. I think it was one of the things that makes those engagement spaces, at least how the OLC has been approaching them and the volunteers working in those spaces. They've made it that, and I really appreciate that. Bye, Angela. Thank you so much. Angela Gunder, folks had to run to a session. But yeah, I do think they're unique. Recognizing who came into the space today. And again, if you have questions, we'd love to hear why you came, what interested you about the idea of the Innovation Studio, and maybe if you have thoughts. But I'd be really curious to hear from you all, and particularly, then we'll transition to Dan about what it's been like to go remote. But when you think about sitting down and designing the idea behind, or possibly even sections or components of something like the Innovation Lab, now the studio, what comes to mind as sort of the heart or the core of that space? So what are the major threads that were important to you as you thought about whether it was a volunteer designing an aspect of that space, or Keegan, when you were one of the leads, and now Dan, one of the leads as well? What were some of the major threads that you knew you wanted to have, and how did you help to make sure that those were staples of the space that year? So Keegan, you're already unmuted if you want to go first.
The first thing was So experts that are fun and interesting is like where a lot of the lifeblood comes in, I think, a lot of the time. So I when I ran it in 2018, like we repeated the game lab that John and I had volunteered for in 2017, and like that year I was intent on, so I got like somebody who is in the educational space, but I would consider much more of a game designer, and can speak towards like those processes as well, but also like folks that I knew would be able to do things like design thinking very, very well, and do like all of those different pieces in combination with the sessions themselves that come into the room, because I think that blending and that complement of all of the, that's what makes it special, is those people, all of the volunteers, the sessions that come in, and balancing all that out together each year with, what the current topics are of discussion and such. So it's good.
John, do you have anything to add to that before we move to Dan and moving online?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's I keep coming back to it's a great place to hang out, but also it's the type of education that I value, I guess. And I was thinking that I'd love for all of our instructional designers that we hire in our program to be able to go to the OLC and just hang out in the TTK area. And I see that almost as like a finishing school for IDs and for ed techs in terms of understanding critical approaches to technology, openness, the ideas around design and storytelling that we value, and just the types of conversations that go on in the TTK or the Innovation Studio are the types of things that I want our people to understand. And it's such a good encapsulation of the conference as a whole, and sort of at least the parts that I value most out of the conference. And so, I feel like it's a great complement to all of the papers that are being given on the sort of narrow, in-depth, studies that are being done. And this is just that area where you can round out your understanding of the conversations that are going on within the conference.
And then so Dan, so one of the other things to share, I suppose, that I neglected in my introduction is I'm one of the co-chairs of this year's Innovation Studio as well with Dan Trago, while also hosting the room today. But Dan, do you want to share a little bit about what we had planned for the face-to-face and what it looked like, and really where our thinking was at when we thought about moving fully virtual?
Yeah, definitely. A little bit different than what we have right now, right? So yeah, a long time ago, Maddie asked me if I'd help co-chair, and we started kind of doing some brainstorming, thinking about the physical space that we were going to occupy with Chicago, and just kind of the idea of especially the bridges in Chicago. So we did a lot of research. I went to Chicago at one point in time and took some pictures. Like we had just the cool narratives that surround the bridges and how it really mapped onto some of the design thinking core of the Innovation Studio and how we work with people in that, and just the types of iteration, the outcomes. There was the Rush Street Bridge that we found this really compelling story. 3 times they tried to build it and it would either burn down or crash. All these different things happened. And what happened is all of Chicago's changed now because they built the Michigan Street Bridge to kind of replace it. And so now you have like, what is it, the Miracle Mile, or this high class shopping down Michigan Avenue. And if you walk 1 block over, the Rush Street kind of goes down to the bank and just stops. And so Rush Street, which was supposed to be kind of the central avenue, never formed because of what happened to the bridge. And it's just kind of an interesting narrative with going online for the conference in the Innovation Studio. So many people have talked about how it's a place that people come together. So what we did is we changed things around a little bit. Instead of just taking exactly what we had, we thought, okay, what do people need instead of just this content that we have to get them? So we made a couple changes, and we're trying to help people think through course design, reflections on the past 6 months, and just the storytelling way that helps us connect with people, because really at the heart of that innovation studio or the lab or whatever it was called at the time, it is the connection, I think, is the heart of that. So yeah.
So if the three of you could describe, well, I don't want to have you do it in 55 words or something of that sort. Ben Scragg in the house. Also, I've just discovered his wonderful face on the screen. So Ben, feel free to hop in here as well to this answer. But if you could describe the Innovation Studio in just a couple sentences for folks who have never been able to attend the conference before, what would that be? And let's go around, I suppose, for the space, because I do want to recognize that not everyone has had the opportunity, and we have quite a larger community this year. So what are things like engagement programs, and what kind of role might they be able to serve at a conference or the learning spaces that we work in? And anyone can respond first. John, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I'll start off. Yeah, I keep coming back to just, its role in the social dynamic, and that if you're a first-time attendee, this is the place to go and just say hi to people. Literally, within 5 minutes of walking up, Ben Scragg just walked up to me and said hi, and then we've been friends for the last 5 years since. And so it's a really useful place for getting into what is OLC and being introduced into the conversations and the people that help run the show.
So Ben, did you want to introduce yourself a bit here?
Yeah.
And if you feel prepared to hop right into the conversation, what is
Sure.
the Innovation Studio to you, formerly known as the lab, and what kind of role can they serve?
That's right.
For educators?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Scragg. Serve as the Director of Design Initiatives in the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at ASU. I'm vagabonding in for this session, so thanks for letting me jump in. Excited to share with you all. John, Keegan, Maddie, good to see you. I see lots of friends in here. Yeah, the Innovation Studio. I think John captured it well. I mean, it's such a multifaceted space and has changed so much. I think continues to iterate every year. And I think building on what John said, I think just the idea of inclusivity and welcome, kind of a welcoming spirit, which I think is what you find in the OLC community largely anyway. I think the thing that's refreshing is that year over year, new folks who come in for the first time do find a welcoming space to engage with interesting programming, but also really like light touch networking. That's not really about thinking about what pitch you make to people or how you introduce yourself, but that as you enter in, people tend to be welcoming to you and invite you in. And a really big conference can become kind of a smaller, more intimate community. And you can find out that there are lots of people who share interests and spur things like a game night or quilting or making conference swag, up to sessions on improv or gaming or even kind of design thinking. So all those different pieces, I think it has a little bit of a potpourri from the programming standpoint, but it's also pretty interactive in the sense that you're not in a session where someone's necessarily, it's certainly not monodirectional, but it's much more relational. So I think I hit all the requisite word salad pieces there, but I think to John's point, for me, and I share this story around OLC every time I kind of get the chance. I was sent to my first OLC conference six years ago. Had been an instructional designer for about 3 months. My team at Ohio State said, "You probably ought to learn how to do this. Why don't you go to an OLC conference and learn from folks there?" And I went alone. They said, "Hey, talk to a few people who are," then it was the technology test kitchen. Go talk to these folks and see what's going on. And I just kind of showed up and said, "Hey, I was told I should talk to you." And a bunch of people, figuratively, but maybe just not literally, wrapped their arms around me and said, "Come on, what are you interested in?" And I really found a great kind of professional learning network that I'm still grateful for today.
Yeah, and I think that if the audience, if you can see nothing else, I think that's what a testament that we would all share is that we're all part of that that personal learning network now, and it certainly feels extremely welcoming and very connected. And we welcome all of you to it, of course, as well. So if I'm an educator and I'm thinking, look, there's no way I can structure right now a 5,000 attendee conference, even a fully online, fully virtual conference. Within the last 3 minutes here, what advice would you give to folks if they're thinking about starting up something like an innovation lab, or technology test kitchen, or a studio within their own learning spaces? And I'll open it up to the group of and all four of you if you want to hop in and share what advice you might have.
I mean, for me, I think it's think about folks in your maybe in your own network that share those interests, but also the ones that inspire you too, because I think those folks are going to be important collaborators in that. I guess challenge, we'll say, in that challenge of moving forward with that. You know, they'll have other experiences, but they'll also be able to push you further in making your own innovation lab, innovation studio.
And just quickly to jump in to say one more thing related to that, Maddie, I think fairly regularly over the conclusion of the spring semester, as folks were kind of especially moving into distance online remote teaching, was you kept seeing repeatedly kind of like Maslow's over Bloom's, and I don't know if I would use that exact analogy, but this idea of creating a space for people and for humans first, that kind of, especially in a space, especially if you're trying to win or build relationships with, folks who are dipping their toes into some of this for the first time, that this can be intimidating, or this can feel impersonal. And so just the invitation and the welcomeness to come play in your space, whether you're working at kind of a fairly technical or sophisticated level of, whether it's working in code or an LMS or new technologies, or whether you're really just inviting people in to start thinking about their instruction in a different way, or how they orient to technology enhanced learning. I think leading with just the openness and being welcoming.
Thank you all. I'm going to turn it back over to our session chair to close this out here in the last minute, but thank you very much to the four of you and to Angela. If you have questions about the Innovation Studio, please feel free to reach out. I did drop links to both Innovation Studios of the past as well as this one. Feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have about what it's like to set up this space and what it might look like in the future.
And I'm just going to pop back in here quickly. Thank Madeline and everyone else for sharing their expertise with us today. Do not forget to complete the session evaluation. And if you have interest yourself, the Innovate 2021 proposals will be open late this summer. So don't hesitate and jump on in and join everyone. Thank you very much. And thanks to the presenters.
See you all.
Bye.